Whoops. There we go.
Yes. Okay, thanks. And if you have questions, please submit them in the chat. There's a chat option at the bottom of your screen, and we will do our best to monitor the chat. I know we often have a lot of questions, but we will do our best to monitor the chat and keep track of questions. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the meeting. And just want to introduce Rethinking Psychiatry. We're an independent, all-volunteer educational activist group. We're based in Portland, Oregon, but since COVID, we've been doing online groups. So the silver lining is that anyone from anywhere in the world can join. And our group is about creating community, educating, and activating for choices. We're part of a larger movement working to promote healing and choices in and beyond our mental health care system. And Molly of Reimagining Recovery, which is a similar group, helped us come up with that part. And we're made up of people with lived experience, professionals, family members, and other allies. Many people identify in more than one category. And we are not affiliated with and don't receive funding from or promote any religious organization, any government entity, any political organization, corporation, or drug company. And thank you to the core members. I'm a core member. We have several core members here. And if you are not on our email mailing list and are interested in being on our list, please put your email in the chat and send it to the host. You can send it to Rethinking Psychiatry and let us know if you have any questions about that.
Well, you can also put it in the chat, but there should be a way to, instead of saying to everybody, just send it to the Rethinking Psychiatry host person, and then you're not sharing your email to everybody with everybody on the call.
Exactly. Thank you for that clarification. And we'd love to hear where people are. That's, like I said, that's been the one silver lining, is that people can join from anywhere in the world. So so if you want to, you are under no obligation to, but if you'd like to put that in the chat, you can let us know where you are currently today. It's fun to see where people join from all over the world. And this event is free. Your presence is enough, but donations are definitely welcome, and they help us to put on more events like this. So there are two ways you can donate. You can either go to our website, which is rethinkingpsychiatry.org. There's a green donate button. You can also send donations to rpdonate@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat. So donations are optional, but very welcome. And we just ask that everyone be respectful and kind. We don't expect everyone to agree on anything by any means. What we're talking about complicated things, but we just ask that everyone speak your truth, but also make space for others to speak theirs. And we believe in the principle of, if anyone's familiar with intentional peer support, one of their main principles is honoring multiple truths, and that's something we believe in. That that the truth can be complicated, and it's important to respect other people's views. And we ask that everyone share airtime. Like I said, we'll have a question and answer period at the end. And I think that's it. I will, Cindy is going to talk a little bit about our mission, and then Grace will talk about some upcoming plans for the summer. So, so Cindy, I will give the floor to you.
Thanks, Rachel. Rachel pretty much covered our mission, but in short, we're a very passionate volunteer group, and we're here to motivate, advocate, and educate for alternatives and choices in the community, and that's informed choices. So I will pass it. Who speaks next? Rachel? Who did?
That will be Grace, and then I know Voyce Hendrix, who many of you may remember spoke in November, is here, and he will also be speaking a little bit about Soteria, California. But yeah, Grace is next, and then Voyce.
So I can't figure out how to put myself in, but I just wanted to say hi, everybody. We are in the middle of our Soteria series. Our next event next month, we are going to have Susan Musante, who was the executive director for Soteria Alaska. And she is going to talk about stories from Soteria, or perhaps there will be a panel of former staff and possibly residents to do a talk from learnings that they had and maybe challenges that they had also. And then we're hoping to have people from Soteria Israel, maybe in June. And then we're going to culminate, we're in the process of just starting to think about doing a peer respite Soteria House Summer Summit, where we're going to do a day thing, or maybe every week in August. We're figuring it out. And hopefully it will involve a lot of breakout sessions about how to bring Soteria, like mini workshops on how to bring Soteria to your community. So if you're interested in helping to organize that, or if you want to know, like if you have questions that you want to see answered on how to bring Soteria or peer respite to your community, please email rethinkingpsychiatry@gmail.com, and Rachel will put that in the chat to everyone. And we will get you involved in the planning committee. Thanks so much.
Great. And we have a special guest, Voyce Hendrix, who worked at the original Soteria House in California in the 70s and 80s, who many of you may remember gave a talk in November. Voyce, did you just want to say a little bit about the original Soteria House?
Yes, it's interesting, but trying to put it in context here is a little challenging. Soteria, as you know, was the original Soteria, and it's really too complex to try to go into any kind of detail here. But I'm more interested to see what the Soteria San Jose has created in terms of Vermont and Alaska, Israel, and all these different places, because Soteria was a study. So there's really a lot of constraints on who we took in and the population at Soteria. So that needs to be understood when you talk about the original Soteria. It was dealing with people who were expected to be chronic in the system, defined by 1971, and there were 7 criteria you had to meet before you could get admitted, which is key. So the point was to intervene at the onset for new people being diagnosed schizophrenic and try to change the path and more what we thought is more normalizing what we at the time called schizophrenia, because schizophrenia was in the study. It was dealing with people who were diagnosed schizophrenic, and the diagnosis then is different than the diagnosis now. So it's a little complicated. So you have to understand that it's probably very different in some ways than Vermont, and especially I know a lot of, since I know very little about Vermont, like it's hard for me to talk to it. And I know a little more about Alaska, and Alma Manor, I think, advised Alaska, that program, and she and I had a lot of deep discussions and conflicts about what I thought was maybe partly a setup for Alaska, which probably impacted on them not surviving. But that's not easy to go into it right now. But I think with the information they had, they did a very good job of doing, because it's a hard thing to confront the mental health system today in any kind of alternative ways. So I'm up for questions. So, but there's not much I can really say about Soteria in terms of its structure at this point.
Thank you, Voice. And thank you to Soteria Vermont. And we'll let them get started and let us know about the work they're doing.
Great. Katie, you made it.
Woohoo!
Oh, I was muted. Sorry, I did make it. Yes. Happy to be here with all of you this morning, or this afternoon at this point. I'm going to screen share, make sure, hopefully we don't have any tech issues. I'm not sure if my sound is sharing though, so I'm not sure if we'll be able to do the videos on my end either, Jason, but otherwise I think we're good to go. So thank you for having us today. And we wanted to start off by saying that we're all coming into this conversation with lived experience, and lived experience brings us to this today. So my name is Katie Bork. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I have been the manager of Soteria House for the last 5 years.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Jason Young, he, him. Yes, I come here with a lifetime of lived experience of extreme states and such, and about 10 years in peer support and 6 years at Soteria. I've been there since day one. I'll pass it off to Aaron.
I'm Aaron Sheehan, and I've been a part of Soteria since 2016 as a client, and now as for the past year an employee. Okay.
My name is Cameron Seneca, and I was a client of Soteria about 5 years ago. I use he, him pronouns, or they, them, if you don't know me that well. And now I'm utilizing peer support to help sort of one person at a time.
And we'll be telling some of our stories throughout this presentation. So welcome. Please make yourself comfortable and take care of your needs. We will be happy to take questions at the end. So feel free to pop things in the chat box or we'll take questions verbally. And there is value in all experiences people share and tell us. We have been having a lot of conversations about doing this presentation and generally presenting about Soteria, and we wanted to offer this slide to just hold space and recognize that there are many intersectional systems of oppression that can impact people's experience. And we want to own and hold space for this and also recognize that this is not an inclusive list. So we have psychiatric oppression and psychiatric incarceration, systemic racism, LGBTQIA+ oppression, criminal histories and incarceration, classism, colonialism, capitalism, the war on drugs, disability and differently abled injustice, accessibility issues, police force and brutality, and systems that require police to respond to a mental health crisis, and other human and civil rights infringements.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that context is important because we talk a lot about Soteria as being an alternative or an option, but really this is something that our communities need. If you Google the largest mental health care providers in the U.S., you'll find that the 3 largest providers are prisons, and there are serious problems with our systems of care. And so I really feel like Soteria is, it's not just an alternative or an option. It's something our communities really need.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think we just want to make sure everyone knows that we're holding all of this going into the conversation today. So we'll do a quick overview here of Pathways Vermont. So Pathways Vermont provides innovative services and training to support people in overcoming challenges and finding community. Pathways was established in 2009. It is statewide. We have about 120 staff, and we're people serving people. So we have our Housing First program, which is originally what Pathways Vermont started with. We have a Pathways Vermont Community Center, a peer support line, and then Soteria House, which we'll be talking with you about today. This is a picture of our staff. This is actually pre-COVID. Cam pointed out that we did have a few of our staff wearing masks in this, but it was actually a pre-COVID summer retreat a number of years back. So this is the staff at Pathways Vermont at the time. The importance of highlighting Pathways Vermont is the value of lived experience at Pathways Vermont as an agency. So 78% of the staff that we surveyed, we did a staff survey for all of this data, had lived experience of mental health challenges. 43% had lived experience of substance use challenges. 60% had lived experience of trauma. 43% lived experience of homelessness. 17 individuals lived experience of hearing voices, and 21 suicide attempt survivors among our staff. So we really want to point out here that lived experience and the value of intentional peer support is integrated into our entire agency. So I talk a lot, people ask me a lot, like, how do we create a Soteria, or how is Soteria working for you? And a big part of my answer is that we are umbrellaed under a larger agency that has a value of lived experience and a value of peer support. And that's really critical.
And I just want to jump in and reiterate, Katie, because it is so remarkable that these percentages, this is not our frontline peer support staff. This is the entire agency. So this represents people who are in administration and finance and all that. It's the organization has this integrity, throughout. All right. Our inspiration. So we are named Soteria, and we're not the first Soteria. Thanks for being here, Voice. I feel it's a little surreal to be presenting this in front of Voyce Hendrix, but I'm gonna go for it. Yeah, we are very much inspired by the work of the original Soteria and Voyce Hendrix and Lauren Mosher. I've always been, very aware that we are not trying to recreate a historical phenomena or artifact, but we are very much informed by and inspired by the work that was done there. And so here's a quote from Lauren: "Personal connection and empathy is the best way to reach those who are struggling with a psychiatric breakdown." So the first Soteria project was run as a formal study with a control group that received conventional care, and the Soteria was a home-like setting that minimized use of medications, and the results were striking. After 6 weeks, psychopathology reduced comparably in both groups, but after 2 years, Soteria participants had better psychopathology scores, fewer hospitalizations, higher occupational levels, and were living independently. Unfortunately, the original Soteria was shut down in 1983, And psychiatry as a whole seemed to take a pretty hard turn into the medical model, and we're very invested in that, and not as interested in exploring alternatives like Soteria. But there was a continuous desire to explore those alternatives in the psychiatric survivor community and other activists. And in Vermont, there was a significant impact from Mad in America. Robert Whitaker put out this book, Mad in America, in 2002. And that was a bit of a watershed moment, at least in Vermont, and I think elsewhere as well. There was a resurfacing of critical psychiatry thought and activism that incidentally in Vermont coincided with a flood. There was a Hurricane Irene in 2011, which wiped out our state hospital, which had been in operation since the early 1900s, and created an opening for some alternatives to be explored. So in 2000, Hurricane Irene in 2011, 2012, the state was looking to invest in alternatives, and this piece of legislation was created to provide funding for Soteria Vermont. And I'm just going to read it out because it's a very concise description of what Soteria Vermont is. This piece of legislation calls for contract for voluntary 5-bed residence for individuals seeking to avoid or reduce reliance on medication or having an initial episode of psychosis. The residence shall be peer supported and non-coercive, and treatment shall be focused on non-traditional, interpersonal, and psychosocial approach with minimal use of psychotropic medications to facilitate recovery in individuals seeking an alternative to traditional hospitalization.
So this is a photo of Pathways Vermont Soteria House, and it's located in Burlington, Vermont. It was opened in April 2015, and it's serving individuals experiencing a first episode of psychosis or extreme states or non-consensus reality. We serve up to 5 residents at any given time. Our average length of stay is 5.5 months. And here's some photos of folks really excited about some coffee donations. And this is a picture of the interior of Soteria. Actually, when it first opened, it's a little bit more decorated at this point with some chalkboard walls and a lot of plants. So we're licensed as a therapeutic community residence with the Department of Mental Health, and we're fully funded by the Department of Mental Health. And as a result, we don't require a diagnosis for intake or for the stay. And for those that are familiar with more mainstream medical model care, a diagnosis is often really critical in order to get your funding or to to get paid. A lot of like billing and services require that. So this feels just really phenomenal for us that we don't have to use any kind of diagnostic criteria for providing services. Meals and food are provided. We meet any of the dietary needs of the residents. It's a home-like environment. We have non-clinical staffing, and we have a self-directed and collaborative service planning approach, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So I wanted to acknowledge COVID-19. Clearly, that's had an impact on everybody's life over the last year and has really impacted how you're able to provide residential services. So more recently, we actually were able to get the vaccine at Soteria. So most of our staff and residents opted into getting the COVID-19 vaccine. And we were really grateful that we were able to provide that to folks on site. We were able to just get a lot of resources within the last few months, including PCR testing on site, antigen testing on site, which really allowed us to, we've been able to stay open throughout all of COVID-19's situation over the last year. One thing I would highlight that some folks have talked about is that staff were required to wear masks and residents were not required to wear masks. And it's one of the only times that, in the 5 years that I've been at Soteria where there was kind of a clear power dynamic at times. You knew who the staff was versus a resident because of the mask. So it's something we spent a lot of time just like talking about and navigating, but happy to take questions about that. We did not have any cases of COVID at Soteria, and we're grateful for that too. I am going to try to play a video, and I'm going to see first if you can even hear this sound. Nope. This video does not work. Jason, were you trying to get this video onto your computer?
I did not have any luck with that.
Okay, that's all right. We will, if folks are interested, this is a video that we actually have on our website at Pathways Vermont. It's an informational video and also kind of a promotional video where we're talking to a possible future resident about what we would hope that their stay could feel like or look like for them. It gives you a brief tour of the Soteria House, and it interviews just a few different staff. I believe it's around like a 4-minute video. So I'll put the link in the chat box at the end if folks are interested in watching it. So this is a really dynamic image of our Soteria community. So as you can see, residents are at the center of the community. There's up to 5 residents at any given time. And then we have residential support staff. We have about 15 staff right now between full-time floater or per diem. We have a 3rd shift team lead, a house team lead, services team lead, program manager, all in like a leadership position. We have a service coordinator. And I think the reason we wanted to kind of show the dynamicness of this is that we have a lot of staffing. And our staffing is what really makes it possible to do what we do and to be able to be with people so intensively. So at any given time, we have 2 to 3 staff on, and we have a supervisor for each shift. We have, Jason is the services team lead, really heading the services and working directly with the service coordinator. We have a house team lead that's ensuring that all of our regulations are met with the Department of Mental Health. So lots of people taking on different roles to make the program function. We also have lots of overtime. We've had a lot of volunteers and interns. We've had therapy dogs. We have a nurse practitioner that works directly with residents and comes into the house a few times a week. And then we have a psychiatrist that's contracted and available to meet with residents once a week if they're interested, but it's not a requirement. And then this kind of, so as you can see here, there's the house depiction. So these are all the kind of folks in the house. And then the service coordinator also works with folks as they transition into the community. So we also have like community providers and supports. We have the Pathways Community Center, which we'll talk with you about in a little bit. We also offer transitional resident services, which is essentially like aftercare services when somebody leaves the residential program. We typically offer that for up to 6 months when somebody leaves, sometimes longer. Sometimes folks have called us after they left the program, even a year later, and said, hey, I'm going through a rough time. Can you offer some support? And we can reopen them into our transitional resident services. And then we also have former residents. And Cam and Aaron, I think I gave a pretty good overview of this slide. So I was hoping you could chime in and maybe also share about the community and the dinners and meetings.
Well, we have community dinner even still now during COVID, but usually we would have community dinners and barbecues open to former residents and transitional residents. So that was really great for having people who were at the house get to know people who used to be at the house and still feeling included when you do leave. And it's really, really integral to how close everyone feels to each other.
I would agree with that. And I don't have much more to add other than, those community dinners pre-COVID were sort of a big part of connecting with, or well, as a former resident, to be sort of further involved. And it's, you know, something that I think a lot of people look forward to.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I would also just stress the value of those community meals, because the doors never shut. You know, you go through the program, you move on, but there's always a way to stay connected to the community, and over time it really built what really feels like a legitimate community. And I think that, you know, Aaron and Cam, we've known Aaron and Cam for 5 and 4 years respectively, and this is, I think that's indicative of, like, you know, how real these relationships are.
I think it's 5 and 6.
Yeah. and Cam's mom is very involved in Soteria in many different ways, and from fundraising to supporting families of Soteria residents. So it continues to grow and deepen, and the relationships continue to grow and deepen.
So this is a picture of some of our Soteria staff from a few years back. Actually, now we haven't got a new picture like post COVID. So now we'll talk about integrating contemporary movements, practices, and values.
Yeah. So yeah, we tried to learn everything we could from the original Soteria, but also there's a lot that's happened between 1983 and now. And I think the biggest difference, and really what is at the core of Soteria Vermont, is intentional peer support. So we really that is the core of our program. But trauma informed care, also very important, something that's really come to the forefront, I think, of modern mental health care. Harm risk reduction, and we've had quite a lot of engagement around open dialogue, or in Vermont it's called the collaborative network approach, but it's based on the Finnish movement of open dialogue. So we've tried to cherry pick from all the most sort of important modern thought and research. So I don't know if we want to talk about that a little bit in terms of, like, how you know, harm reduction works at the house, or do we want to elaborate on that, Katie, or just?
Sure, that sounds good to me. And I actually am realizing I think I can just pull up that video that we were going to show too, just on a different screen. I don't think I'm still screen sharing. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I find really wonderful in terms of harm and risk reduction is that we don't have any requirements around substance use. So folks cannot have any substances on site, but folks could use substances in the community and then return to the house. And we would support somebody through navigating that experience. And I think it's interesting because I've worked in other settings where there's a very strict no substance use policy, and I've seen a lot more substance use in those settings. And in fact, we don't have that many folks that are really using that many substances in the community and then coming back. I really appreciate the openness and welcomeness we have for folks to navigate that experience, though, with staff. We also have a lot of harm and risk reduction in terms of coming off psychiatric medications. So we talk a lot about that, which I think we'll be talking a little bit more about, Jason, in the next slide.
Yeah, we don't really differentiate between psychiatric medications and other substances, you know. And I think, you know, the ability to the harm reduction and the lack of a barrier around the substances and stuff like that, it does create a lot of flexibility for us. We can go anywhere with our residents, you know, even if they want to go into a bar and have a drink or sit on the beach. and have a drink or smoke a joint or something like that. Like staff can be there with them. It's not a barrier to us actually accompanying them and being with them in these different settings. And the open dialogue movement has been pretty influential as well. There are other agencies in Vermont that are embracing the open dialogue modality or movement, and so we're very intentional about bringing people into the Soteria that are important to our residents. So if a resident has family members or friends or significant others, anyone who's important in their lives can come into the house, and we can have meetings together and maintain their social networks and strengthen those networks.
So I'm gonna try to play this video and see if it works. We'll see, because I think it does a nice job giving folks an overview.
Don't think we're getting sound.
Oh, you're not?
Nope.
Okay. Cam, let me know if you can hear it or can't hear it now.
We opened Pathways Vermont Soteria House to provide an alternative place for folks who are experiencing mental health distress or crisis, to provide an alternative space for that experience. It's a home-like setting where people can come and explore that experience that is important and meaningful, and come to terms for themselves what that's going to mean for their lives. Soteria comes from the ancient Greek word meaning safety or salvation, deliverance. In present day terms, we use Soteria to mean a community setting to support people who are experiencing what some people call the first break psychosis. Soteria House is building a new paradigm for mental health services. We are creating community, and we're changing the story about what mental health distress has to look like.
It's a safe place, a comfortable place, and a place where you can explore with others what your experiences are. People may feel like they're going it alone, and it can be different. You can come here, you can be with others, and you know what, you're not so different. People come from unique contexts and backgrounds, but we process in similar ways, and intense life experiences can be extremely liberating to face and to be curious about, and they don't have to be so scary.
I don't think that we're really for or against any one way of healing. We're for people healing the way they want to. We live like we would live in any house. It truly, in every way, is a community in the best sense of the word, I think, and everyone plays a collective piece.
There's something really extraordinary about getting to be with other people who have experienced things like you, things that sometimes feel so isolating and so lonely. There's a lot of power in realizing you're not alone. There's a lot of power in being able to be with a community that's ready to stand beside you.
Hi, I'm Katie. Welcome to Soteria. This is one of our common spaces where we often meditate, read, play musical instruments, or do arts and crafts. Walking through the hallway here, we have some artwork that both staff and residents have done. This is our dining room area where we have dinner every single night, which we are working on and preparing right now as we speak. We offer dinner every single night that meets the dietary needs of any of the residents. So currently we offer a vegan, vegetarian, and meat option.
In the larger scheme of things, it is a short period of time you will stay with us. But we believe Soteria is a place where you can open up conversations and maybe find some answers for yourself and for your journey. At the very least, you will leave with some new tools, new friends, and a community full of hope and support. We look forward to meeting you.
All right. Thanks for bearing with the technical issues here. Oh, am I still presenting, Jason?
Nope, you're good.
You're not. You're not presenting.
I want to be presenting. Going to this one.
Yes, you do. Thanks,
Okay.
Katie.
All right. Can you see now, Choice?
Yes.
All right. Great. Cam, you want to take it away?
Sure. So the two things I want to talk about. First, I'll just read the slide. People are experts on themselves. A person's self-knowledge is the most essential authoritative source of decision-making about their lives. All perceptions are valid and important, even if they're not shared by others. People have the right to reject treatment of any kind. And so, yeah, the two things that I want to talk about around choice at Soteria are, first and foremost, medications. It's not sort of a ultra clinical setting where there's a med call and you are to show up at the window when they request it of you and take your pills in front of them and prove that you've swallowed them. Or sometimes they'll be injected into you. It is truly a choice, this area. The second one is just the choice to engage in the reality that you're occupying while you're staying with us. And that's different from, I think, a lot of clinical settings in the way that they're sort of exclusively trying to remove you from the reality that you're currently occupying and reinsert you back into the shared reality that we all share right now. And at Soteria, they give you the choice to explore the reality that you're in and acknowledge sort of where you're at and what's going on with you. And I think that's a fundamental choice that you don't get everywhere. Does anyone else have anything to add?
I'll chime in. I saw you were shaking your head. No, I think Aaron. So, I wanted to. I think this is maybe a good spot just to talk a little bit about just how flexible our support is. We'll go anywhere, anytime with people. So we really do not restrict people's freedom of movement, unless it's say an immediate safety concern. But we've spent weeks at a time out in the woods with people, or we'll go into the community with people who are needing to move around a lot. Or if someone on the other hand is maybe more withdrawn and having a hard time leaving their room, we'll spend time in their room with them. Like the support is extremely flexible. And on the med issue too, it's not only do we support people's decisions and choices around meds, but we really talk a lot about informed consent, and we have robust conversations about what is the cost benefit analysis. If you are going to use medications, let's talk about them, and really work to inform ourselves, because I know my experience in the system is that informed consent didn't really happen. I was just told it was a good thing for me to do and I should do it. And so we feel like we owe it to people coming through the program that if they are going to talk about medications, we talk about those in a very thorough and balanced way.
Yeah, I think we wanted to highlight here too that there's no locked doors. So, people can come and go as they choose. And we never search people or search their space we have had to search a few times certain spaces, but we've done it with the resident and talked about like the intentionality of why we've had to do it. So there's just a very stark contrast to how somebody's experience might be going into a hospital setting.
Transparency. All who are affected by a decision will be included in the decision-making process whenever possible. We strive to follow the motto, nothing about us without us. I always felt as though I had a lot more rights and liberties at Soteria as opposed to the hospital, where you have rights as a person, but you don't have as many liberties. And it really rings true that everything is really everyone's included in decision-making processes whenever it's possible, which is pretty much all the time.
I wanted to highlight here. Oh, go ahead. Do you have something else,
Okay.
Aaron?
Making sure my internet's okay. Where you continue.
Cool. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I wanted to highlight a couple of things here around that really exemplify the transparency in the program. We are required to take notes through our licensing and funding. We do take daily notes around for each resident. But every resident gets their own login for that electronic note system, and so can read any note that's written about them in real time. And they can also write their own notes and add them to their medical record. So I'm proud of that. I don't think anybody else, I don't think any other program does that. And also, to add to what Katie was saying about no locked doors, there are no closed spaces to residents. There are no staff spaces, right? The house is open to everyone, except the closet that we do lock meds in. And again, that's a licensing requirement, but there are no segregated spaces. I think there's a great deal of transparency organizationally, personally, and interpersonally. Just throughout the program, there's just a lot of integrity and transparency throughout, I would say.
Another thing that I wanted to add to that is, and you kind of touched on interpersonal transparency, and that is that there's a certain authentic nature toward the way that the staff presents themselves. To touch on the learned experience part of earlier in the presentation, the staff is really open with their experience and will have conversations with you that are sort of not the sort that you're likely to have with a nurse in a psych ward. And that is a stark contrast to the medical model that Soteria provides.
I did want to add that knowledge is shared freely and information, and there's a vast library at Soteria with all different kinds of information and books. And people have, like, somebody borrowed a book from me once, a staff member, and they said it changed their life, and gave me back the book, and that really affected me, that I was able to change someone's life when I had just gone out of the hospital and felt really bruised in a lot of ways.
In one book in particular, we do actually have we call it the Big Book of Soteria, which is a big leather-bound handwritten book by people that were there before you and after you, and it's good to be able to see a certain level of transparency through the ages and read about other people's experiences that came before you that aren't exactly there to explain it to you.
Yeah, thanks.
So we kind of just touched on equality, but I'll read the slide. We work toward an anti-oppressive climate by not judging or excluding any individual based on extreme states, non-consensus realities, ethnicities, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, size or other aspect of appearance, religious belief, race, ability, or age. and that's, you know, really important. That's the bedrock of having an open conversation, I think, with anyone in any context. But that is, you know, we talked a little about community meals, and you know, that's where it was really apparent that you know, we were all equals, and it was it's always interesting to sit around a group or with a group at a table and eat and share that you know, superhuman moment. And you know, I think equality is something that you know, we take very seriously. And we also, I just want to point out the not excluding an individual based on extreme states, which is sort of a deeper level to, you know, your normal equality statement, where we're not gonna like treat someone differently just because they're not exactly occupying the same reality that we're in.
And there's a bit on power dynamics. You know, we recognize and strive to be sensitive to power dynamics, which power dynamics are always present in this world for various reasons. But I think we're very intentional around those at Soteria, and transparent about that, and try to minimize the impact on one another, both staff to staff, staff to resident, and in every possible way.
At our community, we value and acknowledge the healing power of compassionate interpersonal relationships. We will work to recognize fear in our midst and to name it as best we can. We support a culture of mutual responsibility. Everyone at Soteria is responsible to work together. Everything about Soteria really has this ease to it that when you're a resident, it doesn't always seem like it's part of the real world. It feels like a bubble, and it's this great container for feeling a part of something. I feel like the most difficult part as a resident was having housemates that were also going through lots of stuff. And now as a staff member, I can see the moving gears a lot more. They weren't hidden before, but they're a lot more prevalent now that I'm a part of them. And I'm really glad to be a part of this community.
And I can definitely attest to the feeling hanging around Soteria of being part of something larger than yourself. It absolutely feels like a bubble. That's hitting the nail on the head. I also want to talk about how, you know, it's, I made a note of it as becoming a peer. You know, put the peer and peer support, and, you know, as soon as you sort of have that lived experience, it sort of, well, it makes you sort of feel fit at the table. You feel like you're sitting in the right spot. And also, I want to talk about like the ripple effect that our community has on people around us. Jason mentioned that my mom is involved with Soteria and involved with Pathways, and I can sort of personally attest to that ripple effect, and how you know, going through something like I went through and becoming part of the Soteria community has really sort of changed my outlook on life and reality permanently, and has become a permanent fixture in my life, and it's really solidified. And that's, you know, a really special aspect of our community.
And Cam, I know your family's actually provided referrals to Soteria as well. So I love that when that starts happening and we're getting referrals from the community, from the grassroots, and it starts to feel like we really are outside of the system.
And as someone who's gone through that, that feels really good to be able to help someone that's, you know, just, you know, met the cops on the worst night of their life and could use a good referral to a place like Soteria, and to have a positive impact on someone that's in the midst of a crisis is really rewarding, from my position. And I'm really happy that I've been able to do that. We can probably go to possibility now.
Thanks.
So people are able to move through extreme states. While some aspects of a person's extreme state may remain, for example, someone may still hear voices, it's still possible to pursue and lead a meaningful life. We strive to nurture and create outlets for expression. Experiences of extreme states are often inherently meaningful. And that's like a great point to the optimism that Soteria instills in everyone that is going through truly extreme states. It's really disheartening to be in a clinical or medical model environment that is just sort of like, okay, you know, you're schizo, whatever, and you're going to need medication to moderate these symptoms for the rest of your life. And even then, you know, you're at a huge disadvantage and a huge risk. And you need to be very careful in your future. And at Soteria, that's not the dialogue. It's, you know, you're going through something, and, you know, we're going to help you through it because we've been through similar things. And it's really refreshing to have a group of people, a community around you that are, you know, also staff for an organization that are instilling in you that there is, you know, a possibility for your life going forward. It's not just going to be like managing your schizo whatever disease.
Yeah, I absolutely believe in the transformative, you know, potential of these experiences. It's been that's how my life, you know, that's been a part of the trajectory of my life, is moving through crises and learning and growing through that and finding personal transformation in this. And I've really become aware of the importance of narrative in our lives, and, you know, having positive narratives available to us. When my brief interaction with the wider system, I was told my brain was broken and that I would be on medications the rest of my life, and that's not a helpful narrative. And so we really strive to support people in owning their own experiences and understanding it in a way that they want to, and that is supportive and healthy for them.
I have a piece that I wrote a little bit about that I'd like to read, and that is, since being rescued from the hospital by Pathways Vermont, I've received support in many ways and quite consistently from this amazing team. At first, I had no idea what to expect, as I did not visit the house before joining the program. I knew the hospital was not the place that I needed to be to find stability, and a person visiting me at the hospital ward I was on, I felt a connection to. They told me about the house, and about a week later, they came to pick me up and bring me home to Soteria. I'd say the hospital was not right for me because I needed to be in a more social habitation to deal with the stuff I was seeing and hearing that others were not. I needed to be held accountable for navigating social interactions and my own reality in a supportive group setting rather than be relegated to a patient's role and spoken around and about as though I wasn't a cognizant being. I felt a connection to that person who got me out of the hospital, and in a large
Aaron, your sound just went.
Aaron, we can't hear you.
some instances, that level of metered out structure may be helpful or reassuring. For me, though, it was suffocating and widening the gap between my reality and the consensus reality. Living in Soteria, I was given a chance and was able to protect my own reality by closing the gap between what I experienced and others enough to where I could build a bridge and remain in both worlds symbiotically. I read somewhere once a passage regarding sociology which spoke about problems arising in groups of people when cultures and human connections are disrupted. All kinds of unethical actions take place because there's not the ties that bind us to the happiness of life and to each other. This being the key to how we act towards others and ourselves. Human connection and culture are like natural checks and balances for anyone, and are critical in extreme states. They both work to bring a person into the fold of what it means to be yourself. In regards to those we interact with, what a culture strives for, it's a big part of how I have been able to come so far in healing my consciousness that felt so bruised. Bruised ribs can heal on their own, but it helps when we have a place to go that is conducive to allowing bruised bone to recover. For me, Soteria was that place, and through all the ups and downs of having 4 roommates and lots of people around with busy lives, there's a strong cadence of what home feels like that I hope will never leave me, which leads me to be so happy about working here now. I aim to offer my experiences and perspective as a sounding board for others going through their own states of consciousness and lives.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Aaron. You cut out a few times, unfortunately, in audio. And at the very end, I actually turned your camera off to see if that helped our audio at the very end a little. But I think I got the most of what you said. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Erin, if you're comfortable sharing emailing what you wrote to rethinkingpsychiatry@gmail.com, we can post it into the video that we make of this, and into the about the video, and we'll have this transcript that'll have the part that blipped out.
Okay.
If you were comfortable.
Thank you. Yes, I am.
Thanks so much, Erin. So now we're going to talk about From Theory to Practice, a day at Soteria. So if treatment can be given in a less restrictive, more respectful environment at lesser cost than the institutional alternatives, then why isn't Soteria the first line of treatment for people needing round-the-clock help? And this is from Soteria Israel.
And someone from Soteria Israel is on the call with us. So that's
wonderful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So being with is really a core concept at Soteria. It's really the heart of the program. And it can look like and be a lot of different things. But from a practical place, we do ensure that we are going to be with someone in the community for their first week at Soteria. So when we're first getting to know them, they're first coming into the house for that first week. We don't make any assumptions about where they're at or what they're going through. We always accompany them into the community, because we found that people are so often so engaged in their internal experience, they might walk into traffic without looking both ways, or they might be behaving in a way that will attract attention, and maybe some well-meaning community member will call the police and someone will be rehospitalized or something like this. After the first week, it's a negotiation, and we talk about maybe concerns we might continue to have, or we might not have any concerns, and we'll discontinue a formal being with, and then maybe relax into a more informal being with. But we will be with as needed to ensure safety in the outside world, in the larger community. Being with can look very different in the sense that sometimes people are in very heightened states, and so it might be all we can do to keep up with people, and be accompanying them in all different settings, out in the wilderness, in the community, in town, anywhere they want to go, we'll go with them. Or it might be that someone is in a very quiet, withdrawn state and maybe having a really hard time leaving their room. So we will make sure that we are offering them connection in their room, making sure they have everything they need in terms of basic needs, food and water, but also human connection in any way that is tolerable or accessible to them.
Cameron, I don't know if you wanted to share, no pressure to share here, but anything about your experience of being with?
Sure. Well, I experienced both intensive being with and casual being with. And, at times, at all times, casual being with at Soteria is, generally speaking, very pleasant. Nobody's requiring anything of you. They're sort of being with you. On the flip side of that, intensive being with is akin to one-to-one care. If anyone has had the pleasure of being through that experience, but that means someone is basically within arm's reach of you at most, and at very least within eye shot at all times, and they're primarily focused on your safety and the safety of everyone you're around. And I spent quite a bit of time in both scenarios, and I can say that they're both better than the clinical equivalent. In my experience, I would say, looking back on it, I prefer the Soteria being with to any type of equivalent provided by a hospital or jail.
I mostly experienced the casual being with and no formal being with. I was very withdrawn, and it's taken a long time to be more outwardly responsive. And that was really a big part of having somebody be with me, was that social dynamic helping to pull me out of being stuck in my own self, in my own hallucinations.
And I like to say that being with is not being next to it. When you blend the idea of being with the intentional peer support, it's a very intentional process. And when people are ready to explore their experiences in more depth, we're all about that. And we are exploring, narratives and what has shaped our lives, and more importantly, how can we begin to empower ourselves to shape our lives going forward.
Thanks. I think it's just worth highlighting that being with is, the biggest tool in our toolkit for supporting somebody in navigating an extreme experience. And our staffing patterns are really critical at times in order to ensure being with to an extent that doesn't burn staff out. So we actually have had periods of time where, we're going through downtown Burlington, or we're in the woods with people for hours and hours on end, and we have staff alleviate other staff in terms of being able to keep up sometimes with somebody that's in an extreme state. So I just wanted to highlight that the staffing here feels really critical, and at times we we definitely, you know, augment our staffing to meet certain needs.
Is this my slide? Should I read this out?
I think it's Cam's, but maybe
Okay.
I'm putting Cam on the
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah, let's make Cam do it.
No problem. Anyway, so resources that are offered, healthy meals, and that's super important. Obviously, what you put into a body has some correlation to what you get out of it, and it's really important at Soteria to provide people, you know, healthy fuel. You know, in my case, to fuel my manic endeavors, and in other people's cases, to sort of provide their brain the proper fuel to heal itself. Because if you've ever been through a process of your brain healing itself, it does it's much akin to a muscle healing itself. There's physical pain in that process, and it's obvious that what you're eating is having a direct effect on how that healing process is happening for you. Creative expression, art, music, and writing. I spent a lot of time creating music, even if it was, screaming and banging on things, but also, playing the guitar, playing the keyboard, playing drums, chanting, drumming. Any forms of creative expression are accepted and cherished at Soteria. Engaging with nature. There's always someone willing to go for a walk with you. That touches on the next thing as well. Part of that being with is that, if you want to go to the gym, we can get someone to go to the gym with you. And, a lot of the time it's like, you want to go now, like within 30 minutes, let's go. And that's a really awesome resource and aspect of being at Soteria. Exercise, super important for blowing off steam and ensuring the body will work in the way that it's meant to. Reframing crisis as opportunity. We kind of touched on that earlier, but that's really important from a staff perspective to remain positive with people that are, especially with people that have just gone through a hospital setting where they were sort of not afforded that optimism. It's nice to be in an environment that reframes that crisis as an opportunity to go forward. Meditation, that's something that I did a fair amount of. I used to joke that I was kind of just currently walking around meditating. I was in a constant state of meditation. I think a lot of people might agree that having a voice in your head is like a meditation that never stops. Peer employment specialist at, I can't actually see that last line. I don't know what it says. Pathways Community Center.
Yep.
Oh, right. So they'll help you find a job, which is awesome. You're at Soteria for 6 months, and the Pathways Community Center employs employment specialists, which will work with different staffing agencies to find you a job around Burlington, which is really awesome. It's a good aspect of what we do at the house.
Thanks so much, Cam. I do want to highlight here that I think a big part of what we do and show up to do every day is to not be coming from a place of fear. And I think some of these activities too, like imagining doing them with somebody that's in a more heightened state, like we do have to make certain judgment calls, but I think the rock climbing really stands out to me. There was a period of time where we were rock climbing really regularly, and there's a lot of trust in rock climbing. And there's also a lot of trust in rock climbing with somebody that is in a pretty intense place, indoor rock climbing. But I just, we really try to push the limits of like options and availability to folks of like how they can engage in the community differently in a way that is meaningful to them, and to find connection. Aaron or Jason, did you have anything for this slide, or can I? You're good.
Nope.
Okay. Aaron, did you want to read this one?
Yeah, I'll do this one. Meetings and groups. Weekly network meetings at the house. Those happen for individuals. House meetings happen as needed or desired. Can happen on the spot for conflict resolution, non-judgmental discussions of how our behavior affects others and the community. Community meetings as desired. Residents and former residents connect around shared Soteria values. Reflective spaces and gratitude circles. Support groups in partnership with the community center. Coming off psychiatric medications. Alternatives to suicide. Hearing voices. Community drumming circle. I have gone to all of these in different roles. Both roles for all of these. My favorites are hearing voices, coming off psychiatric meds, and the community drumming circle. Weekly network meetings can really be, they can be really, really good and really supportive and really helpful. Sometimes it can be daunting to go to them. Sometimes people may or may not want to go, and it is possible for somebody to decline to go. It's encouraged they do go, and you can only put it off for so long, I believe. I didn't really try to put it off for very long, so I'm not sure. But on the regulations on that. But you discuss goals and what you want to be doing, and you make a plan on how you want to exist in the world, and then you're supported through that. And house meetings are not as individual as that. Those are housemates and staff talking, and there's a lot of reflective spaces and gratitude circles. Would happen a lot around community meals on and at dinner or regular any meal really. People would offer different gratitudes before we eat.
And I would just add that although I think these structured, meetings and groups are really important, to be in the house really, it often feels like an endless ongoing meeting or group. It's all the interactions are very intentional and purposeful, I would say.
That's a good thing to bring up, is that when you're in the house, it doesn't feel compartmentalized or segmented. There aren't a lot, there are, but there aren't a lot of closed conversations. It's very important for people to come and go from conversations at will, and it makes it for a very sort of dynamic setting, and keeps the conversations interesting. So it's a good way to put it, that it always kind of feels like an ongoing group.
I would highlight here too with the weekly network meetings. Those are hosted by the service coordinator. So that's where we kind of have the interactive conversations about what the service plan will look like. And the service plan we update monthly. So we have the weekly network meetings and then monthly update a service plan to be as, and we try to make that as interactive as possible with folks.
Yeah, that's where we agree on how we're going to work together, right? Like what goals does an individual identify, and how can we be supportive in those goals?
Jason, do you want to read this one or?
Yeah, absolutely. Successes and innovations. Transparency. We touched on that earlier, but I really am proud of how transparent our program is for residents. Open and inclusive peer support model. I think what we've done here is an innovation, because although we do, when we hire for staff, we do weight lived experience heavily. It's not a litmus test. You don't have to identify as a psychiatric survivor to be engaged in peer support. If you are willing to work with the values and practices that we've developed and identified with intentional peer support, you can be a peer. Anyone can be a peer if you agree to work with our values and practices. So I think that's been really important, to move sort of the peer movement forward and not keep it sort of siloed off as a psychiatric survivor movement per se. I like to say that I think we identify peer support as a way of working with people rather than an identity. No clinical supervision. That's huge for me too. A lot of people that are doing peer work are doing it under clinical supervision. We have no clinical supervision. Peer support is at the forefront of our program through and through. Free since its inception, although we have a sliding scale. At the beginning of last year, the state imposed the necessity for us to charge room and board technically, but we have a sliding scale that has allowed us to avoid charging people any money. We're 6 years in and we've never charged anybody a dime to be at Soteria, which is so important for us to be able to serve people from anywhere in the community. Weekly community dinners for all former residents, also super proud of that. I think it's a super important part of the program. We have two meals a week, one on Saturday, one on Tuesday nights, where we invite anybody who's ever been to the program to come back and share a meal with us. That's really been important in building and sustaining the community. And collecting stories for video projects. We've had a couple of different projects for collecting stories, both audio, just audio and in text and in video, so that we can continue to amplify people's voices and tell people's stories and empower ourselves and be heard. Challenges. There have been challenges. The preconception of residential as a step down. So the larger mental health system sees residential as a step down that you go to after you're stabilized in a hospital setting. And so what we're trying to do is get in front of the line and meet people before they go to the hospital, so that they don't have to go through the hospital system at all. But again, the rest of the system doesn't work that way and hasn't necessarily recognized that in us. So we're still working on that in terms of educating the community and the system of care about what our mission and our practices really are. Challenging the standard of care. We've definitely had pushback from psychiatry, in that the standard of care calls for, medication early and often, and we're allowing people to make their own decisions. And I imagine some psychiatric professionals would see that as irresponsible, potentially. Consistent referrals, finding our ideal candidates that have, don't have a history of hospitalization or medication. That's harder and harder to find those people. People are being medicated earlier and earlier, more aggressively. But those people are still out there, and we do get referrals from the community. But definitely a challenge in our current society to get to the people we want to get to at the right time. Consistent exits and exit planning. I believe we're experiencing a bit of a housing crisis, really. Housing is very expensive and hard to come by. So that's one of our biggest challenges in transitioning people back out into the community, is finding stable housing. And just the everyday challenge of what do we carry into this work? Preconceptions, fear, stigma and trauma, just navigating these situations and these relationships.
I want to just invite everybody to mute your microphone, especially if you have any background noises, so that it's not getting in the way of the speakers trying to concentrate. Thank you so much.
So Cam, I'm going to hand this over to you, and then while you're talking, I'll see if I can get your video to work on my end. Cam, you're still muted. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. For those who came in late, Voice was talking about in the original Soteria House that the sort of qualifications for being there were basically schizophrenia, and how that very well may have changed. And so I believe that the way we denote it is early crisis or first break psychosis. But anyway, I'm going to provide a little bit of clarification as to maybe the types of mindsets that someone is in, although it is varied, the type of mindset that I was in, at least, upon coming to Soteria. Just bear with me here, I'm going to read something. I remember running from the hospital staff to a bathroom in the observation unit, sobbing to myself in the mirror and repeating over and over, I knew it was a test. I knew it was a test. In retrospect, the fact that my strongest delusion the day I was committed was my indisputable genius is both embarrassing to me and now is my most useful reference point in checking my own okayness. I remember thinking I'd reached the final step in figuring this whole thing out, which, if I recall, had something to do with the fall of Rome and the federal antitrust laws of the 1980s or 1890s. I was convinced that I had a deeper sense of understanding behind the fundamental shortcomings of the American condition, and I'd conceived of a superior system of civilization. Naturally, it involved killing everyone deemed a threat to society and abolishing the judiciary branch of government. I found a theory of color significance, where I decided once and for all that my favorite color is black. It represents the reality of nothingness around us. It represents eternity and reminds me that I inhabit a small rock spinning through space in an ultimately pointless existence. I discovered there is a universal language made up of pro-baseball-like signals that are largely involuntary, and they supersede verbal language. And the right side means truth, and the left side means a lie. I separated the ideas of my body and my existence in the concept of I, my being, and me, my body. I inferred through this separation that what my body did was not a legal issue, because I no longer identified with a civilization that would use such arbitrary, intrinsically meaningless terms as illegal and legal. Last but certainly not least, I decided my dream job was to work for the CIA. I was convinced that the proper testing of an agency candidate was to admit a perfectly sane person to a mental hospital and see exactly how long and to what extent said person would crack. This is one of my more embarrassing memories from that time in my life, due to exactly how long the CIA thing stuck for. I actually filled out and sent the official application years later, and I'm totally disqualified because I just disclosed that in a public forum. Anyway, thankfully, my delusional connection between the Central Intelligence Agency and the hospital to which I was admitted identified a fundamental reality of the current psychiatric medical system. The fact is, we are being watched. Things we say are recorded and reviewed, And if we say the right things in the right place, we will meet government authority. If you are lucky, that authority is going to bring you to a hospital. I may be using an uncommon example, but it outlines the fact that the current systems of healthcare and government are inextricably linked. The basic evidence is that in the vast majority of involuntary hospitalizations, the police transport the patient. The alternative is that residents of Soteria are brought in by peers, and the experience creates a parallel pathway of entry into the mental health system. My dark, rainy car ride with Jason to the north end of Burlington is a fond memory, and cannot be more different from my experience of being delivered from a correctional facility to an involuntary hospital in the back of an unmarked van with state license plates. The difference is that Soteria became a place that I was not only willing to return to, but eager to become a part of. I'm very grateful to be speaking here today and would like to welcome Erin, who is also going to speak to their experience.
I'm actually going to try to share your video first, if that's still okay. I think I got it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, and then Erin, we'll have you, I think it's a cool opportunity for folks to maybe see one of our video projects.
Shout out to Jack at Envision Pictures.
My name is Cameron Shaw Seneca, and
Can you hear the sounds?
I'm from Pollitt, Vermont.
Yep.
And I'm 22 years old. I grew up in call it a rural area. For a brief snapshot, I would say I grew up a fairly normal childhood. My parents are divorced and back together and love each other. That doesn't happen very often, but it definitely had an effect on how I grew up. As far as coming in contact with Soteria after a psychotic break, it was a fairly rapid onset thing. It was inside of, a month that the whole thing came about, and, this needed to be addressed. I went into Rutland Regional Medical Center. Thought I was acting completely normal. They're smarter than that. Got upgraded to the one-to-one facility. I sort of understand why they work the way they work. It's painful.
Just lost sound.
Well, we lost it, Katie. Katie,
Well, look
we
at
lost
that camera work. All the angles are perfect.
We lost
Clarity
the audio.
is uncanny.
There's your mom.
More talking, more nice camera work. It's because the OneDrive isn't signed in.
It sounds like we lost the audio.
Yeah, a while back.
Well, now I can't hear you, any of you at all. Cam, can you talk to me for a second?
Test, test, test. Hello, Katie. Can you hear me?
All right. Erin, why don't you move on to your sharing of your experience, and I'm going to exit in and out. It looks like I lost connection here.
All right.
A lot of questions. I know it's almost
I have
20 of, so just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
When I'm catatonic, I can hear you. If you touch my arm, I can feel you. And if someone is disrespecting me or treating me kindly, I know, I can tell. I am aware. I experience hallucinations to the point where I will stay very still to preserve my sense of calm and not feed into any hallucinations. At a certain point of staying still, my muscles contract, and it becomes more and more difficult to move. When I am here, I need to be included in social settings. I have very heavily relied upon mythology and archetypes as a way to empower myself when I feel oppressed and stifled by world issues. Keeping my personal narrative mythological gave me a framework to live within that allowed me to keep from separating into different personalities or lashing out violently. Soteria really helped me to feel welcomed into the embrace of a place I could bring my narrative into. It presents a more coherent stage where I can now feel less isolated. And I just wanted to say that my experience going into Catatonia was a 6-month spiral. And thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Aaron. We just have a final quote to wrap up here. I don't think I have screen sharing anymore, though.
Oh, you know what, Katie? I can just read it.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah. We typically end this presentation with a quote from Dory Midnight, who's an activist and writer. So I'm going to read that. It's nothing new to invite people into your home, to give them some tea, listen to their grief, hold space for their pain, lay them down on cushions on the floor and pray with them or touch them or move energy and offer them remedies made from plants and stones. Our healing traditions are so massively co-opted, then mangled in the maw of capitalism. People need self-determined, bone-deep, individual care and support in a community healing framework, because we are all healing from isolation from each other. We're still healing from racism and poverty and oppression and trauma. And we need healers who get that, to offer us their time and skills to help us heal on an individual and collective level. Thanks. I think we're ready to open it up for Q&A if anyone's is curious.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, sorry. We put our emails in the chat box too, in case folks wanted to email after. You're welcome to email us with questions or comments.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. That was great. And yeah, we had a lot of great questions, and we'll do our best to get through them, but it sounds like emailing the questions is also an option if we don't get to all of the questions. So the first question was from Jack. Does the umbrella agency also house medical model services? In Oregon, we may be receiving state monies on a peer run respite, but our umbrella organization is the state with many medical model-based rules which are not compatible with our recovery peer principles. If your umbrella organization is also a medical model, how do they answer to regulators who expect their contractees to abide by medical model practices, yet allow Soteria Vermont to abide by recovery practices?
That's a good and also kind of complex question. So I think Pathways Vermont is a nonprofit and functions as a nonprofit and receives a lot of various grants from the Department of Mental Health and from other agencies throughout the state, such as the Department of Corrections, for example, for our Housing First program. So we do receive funding from places that, I think adhere to the medical model. We have a lot of support from the Vermont Department of Health to have peer-led programs. So Pathways Vermont also has a training institute that does peer programs. And we also have the Peer Workforce Initiative Development Grant. It's like a program that I might not have that right, but we're doing a lot of peer resources and outreach. So our Housing First program, I believe, does require for certain funding sources, as an example, for somebody to meet with a psychiatrist once a year. And I believe that's like one of the caveats of that particular model, or was when I was working on the Housing First program. So I don't know if that really I'm not sure if I'm answering your question. I think we're able to work within the systems in order to get funding and try to aspire to be as peer-oriented as a larger agency as possible. Soteria itself is very peer-led, and although we have the contracted psychiatrist as an option for folks, the psychiatrist doesn't have usually direct input in what happens to a resident or what our service planning is looking like. Does that answer the quick? I can't remember the name of the person you said who had the question. Does that answer your question?
I would say,
Yeah, yes, this is Jack Hotrick, and I just posted in the chat the idea about the grants, some of the money being put into a grant framework is helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great. The next question was from Jean, and it was, what is the criteria for acceptance?
It's flexible. You know, there is some flexibility, but our ideal candidate is someone who is experiencing a first break psychosis and is medication naive and without a hospitalization history. But again, those people are hard to find, and so we're looking for people who are as close to that as possible.
And I would highlight here that that's not a reflection on a failure of any individual. I think there's a lot of failures in our systems that have people infiltrated into a medical model of care or into hospitalization. And then again, we had highlighted this in our challenges as residential being seen as a step down from a hospital. So we're really trying to shift the mindset at large and see residential as a first line option for folks that are going through an extreme state. So I just want to highlight that because it really is a systems failure and not like an individual failure if somebody has had that experience and then comes to Soteria afterward.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, our goal is to be early intervention where we can have the most impact on someone's life.
Great. Next question is also from Jack. Is open dialogue facilitated by peers, as I believe it should ideally be, but is it different from how open dialogue is facilitated by, excuse me, professionals that would first require a psychiatric evaluation and diagnosis assigned?
Yeah, we made open dialogue our own thing. I'm sure anyone who's, you know, credentialed in the open dialogue world probably doesn't even want us using those terms because we do not practice it the way that I think other people do. It is peer facilitated, but it has allowed us to work with outside organizations who are employing that modality. So if we're having a network, an open dialogue style meeting within Soteria, we can do it however we want, but we also do engage with outside services where there might be a psychiatrist present, and then, you know, we make the best of that. But we're super flexible and don't have any rigid requirements. We're just having meetings where we're inviting anybody the resident wants to come and be a part of a meeting. We do that.
Yeah, and our network meeting definition is different than the network meeting from open dialogue. It's not constructed in the same fashion. So for us, network meeting means a space where anybody can come that the resident wants to be there to talk about their service plan and why they're in the program and how they're engaging in their life. So I just wanted to clarify that. We've kind of alleviated any of those mainstream open dialogue talks about the person of concern, for example, and we never use that kind of language.
This is Grace, and I just want to offer, Cindy and I have been training in open dialogue for a while, and yay, abolishing person at the center of concern. That language is so frustrating, and it is a conversation happening in the international open dialogue community. But the other things that you mention, most of the other things that you mentioned are consistent with open dialogue. There isn't a requirement. There actually is not a diagnosing. There was something else you mentioned that sounded really consistent, but actually one of the other things though is that we don't require people to talk about service plans. They talk about whatever they want. So I think that it's much more aligned with what open dialogue, the heart of open dialogue is maybe than what maybe you think you're doing. So yay, cool.
Thanks, Grace. I want to clarify too that with the service planning, that's actually a requirement for our therapeutic community residence regulations with the state of Vermont. So we have to abide by TCR regs, which if anyone's interested, you can actually just pull up the Vermont TCR regulations online and read them. And one of those regulations is to have like a treatment plan. And we obviously use the language of service plan. And some of the things we do are because we're obligated to do them to get our funding. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when talking to the Finns about how they're doing open dialogue, when they do talk about diagnosing, it's for the same reason that they have to, when they have to include that for their funding stream, but it's not really part of what they're doing for open dialogue.
Great, and we have some resources about open dialogue on our website as well. Yeah, so thank you. Next question is from Jan. I'm part of the Hearing Voices Network's Friends and Family group. Are there residential programs for people with many episodes of altered states and where medication is not effective? Years later, family and loved ones are seeking other ways. Is Soteria looking into servicing these people, or can they recommend a place? Tapering is very difficult, and one is often hospitalized during the process, if not mandated to stay on medication.
Well, I would bring to people's attention Inner Fire, which is a program in Southern Vermont that is actually dedicated to getting people off psych meds who may have been on them for a long time. Beatrice Birch, a wonderful human being and a friend of mine. But other than that, I don't know. I don't know about a lot of programs that are really anything like Soteria that are focusing on other demographics. But hopefully in the future, I think the Soteria model will work for anybody, and we just need to have more of them and potentially maybe some more specialized versions.
There are the groups, the Hearing Voices and Coming Off Psych Meds, which are at the community center, which is a part of Pathways. So it's not connected, it's not exactly Soteria, but it's open to the community. So that would service some people and be non-residential.
The Coming Off Psychiatric Medication uses Will Hall's the Harm Reduction Guide to Coming Off Psychiatric Medication as a resource. It was published by the Icarus Project and is a really great resource to folks. Another thing just to mention is Inner Compass Initiative has the Withdrawal Project, which is Laura Delano. So another resource we give folks.
Great, excellent. The next question was from Svetlana. She said, "I noticed there were a lot of attractive young women in the video. How do you prevent sexual harassment from happening in the setting?"
And assault.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I would say, we obviously we cultivate a very respectful environment and community, and we've had very little problem with that. It has come up, and we just address it very directly and offer consistent expectations and boundaries. And if someone ultimately cannot meet those expectations, they would be removed from the program ultimately. But it's been very rare, very extremely rare.
And I think, in the times where we have had kind of conversations around this occur, we definitely have had, kind of community meetings to talk about certain situations, or meetings with multiple staff to try to support in the situation, and really just holding to like, hey, this is, one of the very few expectations we have of you being able to be here and us showing up to be here with you is, not tolerating certain behaviors. Like we wouldn't have any tolerance for like sexual assault, whereas we might have a little bit more tolerance for like a verbalization of like sexuality or interest around certain things, and try to navigate that and try to show somebody what that looks like. You know, an example of something we experience actually a lot, not a lot, but have a handful of times at Soteria is nudity. You know, so we actually allow people to be nude, you know, not obviously folks that work there, but residents we've had some residents that like to walk around nude. And as long as the behavior isn't sexualized, we try not to sexualize the body without there being like a sexualization to the act of their presence. So yeah, I just want to clarify that too. Like, I think we don't want to put sexualization out there just unless it's actually being verbalized or acted upon.
I think the short answer is just address behavior directly. You know.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And this is somewhat similar, and I think Cindy also had a similar question. Amy asked, what if a person threatens violence due to suppressed trauma, psych med withdrawals, paranoia, and or other toxic beliefs and exposures, often combined with poor self-reflection, expression skills? I'm speaking from my family's experience, so it sounds like kind of along the same lines. How, and I know Cindy asked a similar question about if someone is threatening harm to other people. It sounds like you've already spoken to that somewhat, but how would you handle that? And I know Cindy also asked if you've ever had to physically restrain people.
So we don't do any physical restraints. All of our staff are trained in NAPI, which is non-abusive psychological and physical intervention. We do have a punching bag. We have two punching bags that we direct people to. We also have tried to engage in a lot of just kind of, I don't know, Jason, if you want to tell the story of the plates. I'm thinking of a time too where we bought like a bag of stuffed animals and like ripped up stuffed animals with residents. So we try to like redirect that energy into an outlet that feels appropriate or manageable.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, give people an outlet. And threats are we can navigate threats often, you know, but it's really when it crosses over into a physicality that that's problematic. But I think we've developed a very high tolerance for you know, difficult behavior or transgressive behavior, and have really, I think I have sought to see the power in it and the importance in it and the meaning in those transgressive behaviors. So it's not really about, I think we've really moved beyond a paradigm of like control and manage to, okay, this difficult behavior is presenting itself. How do we engage it in a creative way? How do we get to the bottom of this? Why is this going on? Instead of being focused on how we stop things, how do we let it actually, maybe how do we let someone express something in a way that they clearly need to, right? If someone is expressing aggressive or transgressive thoughts or behavior, there's something important in there, and how can we work through this with these people?
Great. And Luke and Teresa had similar questions about if you've had success in diverting people from the ER, and kind of how you've done that, and if you've kind of publicized that success to increase support for your program.
That one's a little bit tricky to answer. I think if we're able to, you know, support somebody before we've definitely been able to support people before they end up in the emergency room. Sometimes they've already had that exposure prior though. So like if they have a different instance where maybe they get referred to us through crisis screeners or through their parents. You know, I actually like met somebody in their parents' house and encouraged them to get in my car and come to Soteria, and their parents were otherwise going to take them to the emergency room. I think that's like a really concrete example. But one of the problems I identify in the system of care in Vermont is that once somebody is in the emergency room, if they're emergency evaluated, they're considered like EE'd. And unfortunately, until they go through that system within the hospital, we're not actually allowed to like to intervene, if you will. Like they're not allowed to get referred to residential at that point. So that's just a barrier. Once somebody's in the emergency room, if they've met a certain evaluation standard, they're not going to be referred to us probably until they're hospitalized.
Makes sense. Okay, great. And one other question was, what is the cost of room and board?
We haven't had to charge it, which is great. So we did a kind of makeshift sliding scale. So in January 2019, our funding actually, from what I understand from the Department of Mental Health, actually is Medicaid funding that is funneled kind of differently. So we don't have to actually bill to receive the funding. So there was some kind of change in the guideline, and they did require us to like at least be considering charging room and board. But we created a sliding scale and have yet to actually, we have people sign off on like waivers explaining like why they can't afford to pay, or the only reason we would even ask somebody if they can pay is if they had income. So folks with no income don't even get asked that question around payment.
Great. Thank you. I think we covered everyone's questions, but if not, like Jason and Katie said, they're available by email, and I know they shared their emails in the chat if we did not get to your question. Thank you so much to everybody. A lot of great questions and great material, and it's, as many people said, it's so heartening to hear that Soteria Vermont is thriving.
And I want to make a plug that if anybody wants to make a donation, just please go to our page, rethinkingpsychiatry.org. There's a big green button, green for money. Press it. And we would love any donation. All of our programs are always free, but we do have costs, and we're all volunteer funded. So please make a donation if you're inspired to. And also very important is put your email address to the host, Rethinking Psychiatry host. If you're not already on our sign up, we will sign you up and you will get notice when we have Soteria Alaska and Soteria Israel, and when we do the Soteria and Peer Respite Summit. And anybody who wants to get involved in creating that, figuring out how that's going to look, please also email us your email address and let us know you're interested. And we're in the very beginning of starting to create that. And so come get in on the ground floor. Woohoo.
One quick thing, somebody asked about an anecdote about someone that was having suicidal thoughts. Tell them that the thoughts are normal. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can't take it back if you actually decide to do it.
Yes. Beautiful. Well said. And I work for a crisis line. I can actually share that in the chat. And yes, and there's also a great program called Alternatives to Suicide, I believe, out of the Western Mass Recovery Learning Center. But yes, absolutely. It sounds like normalizing those thoughts and those struggles is absolutely very helpful.
And we offer that group too. I just wanted to clarify. That was the group, the Alternative to Suicide group that we were mentioning. We had staff get trained by Western Mass RLZ staff, or Wildflower Alliance now.
Yes.
And then I got to train with you all. It was
Nice.
Pathways Vermont and me in Portland. It was very funny.
Nice.
And you all did an amazing job. It was so beautiful.
I just wanted, I know we're at 12:02, and so we should be closing, but I just also wanted to put in a plug because not everybody was able to read the chats. But if anyone has interest in helping me, I'm going to be training staff and kind of taking the lead in a newly funded adult family home that hasn't even been purchased. So it probably won't happen until near the end of the year. But I would love ideas on how to make it like a first step towards Soteria. So if you write Rethinking Psychiatry at gmail.com and just put Cindy in the subject line, I would love to talk with anyone and everyone that would like to give ideas or critiques, tell me what to watch for or whatever. And thank you, Soteria Vermont. It was incredible. It's wonderful.
Yes. Yes, and thank you, Cindy, for your tireless advocacy and work. Yes, thank you all. This was wonderful. And we will have the recording on our YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to listen to it again, or if you have someone you know who wasn't able to make it, we will have that on our YouTube channel by later this week.
Will we get Cam's video that we didn't get to hear all of? Is there a way that we can get that so that we can hear the whole one?
Yeah,
I can turn it to grade.
Katie, you can send that.
Yeah.
if you could, or if it's posted somewhere and you just want to send the 2 videos, the links, so we could send people back to your site. And again, Erin, we'd love that first piece that you read that got blipped out a little bit. If you want to include the transcript, or Cam, if you want to include yours, we can put it all together on the video and create a package. And like, this was such an excellent presentation, blew my mind, so lovely. And hopefully y'all will be involved in the Peer Respite Soteria House Summer Summit. We'll be talking.
Yes.
And it's afternoon. I want to invite anybody who wants to stay and visit together. I'm going to turn off the recording and y'all can put yourselves on gallery view and talk amongst yourselves. And I just want to send, again, great thanks to all of you Soteria Vermont folk, to you Voice, and to all of the amazing people who, like, there's such a wealth of experience among the participants. So we can talk a little bit.
Did Voice want to have one last say or not?
Yes, I was asking, is it possible to have one last say here?
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
What did you think?
Please.
My impression, sort of blown away. You guys have captured Soteria. And given for 40 years, which was a different, I mean, it's very different time. The language is very different because languages have changed. There was no such thing as peers. There was no such thing as recovery back then, but you've captured it with a very different language, but the essence of it is there. And I'm impressed.
Woohoo!
Pretty much it.
I can't tell you how much
had the most control of Soteria to its life. So I mean, I'm saying that from, from experience, not from just being nice.
I can't tell you how much that means to me personally, Voice. And I've tracked down, recordings of you, and all of the stories that you tell about the original Soteria. It makes me feel like I would be right at home there. And I think you would be right at home at Soteria Vermont. And if you're ever in Vermont or want to come to Vermont, we would love to host you for a visit.
I was thinking that it probably would be a very interesting experience for me, because just realizing what we did would last over 40 years is just, for me, is exciting.
Hopefully for community dinner.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
I think it speaks to, there's something timeless and just very human about what we're doing.
That's what I mean. The fact that even the language that being with, we talked about doing to a lot more than you guys do, but being with is, you sort of caught the essence of that. The other part of it that you talk about peers, that was probably the most untalked about thing about Soteria, which is probably one of the most powerful thing about Soteria, is that community that it created. that never gets talked about, but that really made Soteria successful. Where in your case, you probably have to control. But at Soteria, I sound to say anybody could come, ex-residents and ex-staff, ex-volunteers, really meshed in the community. Then it became sort of one community, and they could visit Soteria anytime and come and eat anytime, pretty much, and it never became a problem. But yeah, like I said, it was a different time, and situations very different. So it's not to imply that that it's different. It's just that the situation was different. We didn't have a large organization to be involved with. It was just the Soteria program.
Thank you, Voice, for sharing that. That makes my heart flutter. I can just imagine what they're thinking and feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing myself talk after 40 years, which is kind of strange.
So everybody, next month for Soteria, Alaska, and perhaps Voice again. And we really are looking forward to having your support and genius and brilliance and helping us put on the Soteria Respite Summit. I got that
Summer
wrong.
Summit.
Summer Summit, with the idea that we want this model to begin to really permeate everywhere. This is the model for real healing and empowerment. So please join us.
Do we have time for me to say something? This is Susan.
Oh, Susan, you're on.
Sure.
Of course.
I don't see you. Okay. Yes, say something and I'll try to find where you are. And
I don't know, I can see me. But anyway, I just want to say thank you for this great presentation and the sharing. And yeah, you knocked it out of the park. It is a different time. I've started to talk about Soteria. I think it's impossible. I think Voices spoke to that. Also, Voice, thank you for your work over the years. And before we do our thing next month, I'd like to chat with you offline. And so I hope you and I can do that.
Susan, why don't you say who you are? I don't know if everybody knows.
Oh, well, I'm just Susan. And I was the original executive director and on a team that developed Soteria Alaska, which unfortunately closed. And we will talk about that when we meet next month, because that's a whole complicated story, but not so complicated. And I heard earlier that Voice has some thoughts about that. So I'd love to chat more about that with you. But basically, I wanted to say you guys knocked it out of the park. Thank you so much. I had the opportunity to visit Soteria Vermont before you opened, when you were just procuring the house. And I remember walking through the house and talking about how really the environment and the location is so important. And again, you guys, you had it in exactly where I would have put it. You could get to places, but you still had, I think you had that open field, if I'm remembering correctly. So really great. And I just want to underline the whole notion of being with is the crux of it. So what I've been thinking about lately is in this world, we can't really do an exact model Soteria for a lot of reasons. One of them being what Voice highlighted earlier is that it was a research project. So it had strict things that had to follow, but it also had some leeway that it didn't have to deal with, the regulatory, the regulatory stuff is a nightmare. I know you guys already know that. So, but I wanted to say is I've started to think about it, not just as a model, but an approach. Like, what if we just treated people differently? Like, instead of the doing to and being with. And when we talk next month, I'm going to talk, I think we'll have some good stories about what being with looks like in today's world, which is not that different from what I think it looked like in the 70s, actually. So, but it comes with great risks on getting shut down and other types of things. So, but thank you so much. That's all I wanted to say. And I hope to see all of you. I want to have more conversation about this.
And as long as we're doing this, we might as well just give a shout out that there are people from the Soteria Network UK, and Avrami from Soteria Israel is here. I don't know if either of them want to say anything. We're past time, but whoever needs to leave can leave. If anybody wants to stay, you are welcome to. And at some point, I'll turn off the recording and people can just talk amongst yourselves. But I just wanted to see if anybody from the different continents want to chime in. Or not.
Well, yes, actually. Can I be heard?
Yes. So please introduce yourself so I can find you and put you on the screen.
My name is Yael. I'm in Israel. It's nighttime here. And I've been following you and following Voice when I heard him in, I guess, November. And I live in the northern part of Israel. And I live in a kibbutz, a religious kibbutz. We've had in the last number of months a process of learning about Soteria. There are 3 Soteria houses in Israel, 2 in Jerusalem, 1 for women, 1 for men, and in the different part of the country, there's a house for men and women, Soteria House. And we are, God willing, opening a new house, the 4th Soteria House in Israel, sometime next year. We're in a process of learning how that can be done. And the process has been a number of months of a few members of a steering committee, including me, where we've been talking to people in our community who have never heard about Soteria, and many people have never heard about issues of mental health. And a long problem, even during the COVID problems of not being able to really meet together, we have been over a number of months talking to people, and we had a vote about a month ago or 2 months ago, which surprisingly, I think 86% of the people who could vote voted. Actually, anyone who lives here could vote. 86% of the people voted, and about that percentage of the people voted to, yes, open it up here. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm here, and we're very much for being with. And so it's been fascinating to listen and hear and learn.
So cool. Thank you. Toda rabba.
Bavakasha.
Yes, I can also introduce myself. I was a little bit shy because my English is not so good, but I take courage and a little bit talk. My name is Evremi, and I am also from Israel. I was from the established team that established the first Soteria in Jerusalem and also the second one, together with Professor Pesach Lichtenberg. I was very, I don't know the word, yeah, maybe you will help me, jealous, I remember, jealous about Soteria Vermont, because you are so you're so similar to the original. And when we'll talk about the Soteria in Israel, it's not so similar like how you build your Soteria in Vermont. And it's very amazing. I don't know if this is a real word, how you did it. but the spirit of Soteria, so we brought it to Israel. And now in Israel, we have like 10 houses in the spirit of Soteria. And every house, it's a little bit different. And the government are paying with a HMO, I think it's a word, maybe. They are paying in the Soteria houses, but we don't have 5 people, and it's not only for psychotic episodes, it's for every mental break. We started the first house with no medication, but overgoing, we saw that not everyone can deal with no medication, and especially people with a manic episode. We thought that we cannot manage in our house because it's not only for a psychotic episode. So people that have manic episode, also they want to be inside the house, but sometimes with no medication, it was ended in hospitalization. They turn over from the house to hospital. So in Israel, it's a little bit different, but the spirit of Soteria is, of course, the basic and the nothing about us without us, like you said, and the being with. And in 2 months from now, we will talk a little bit more about the Soteria in Israel.
Thank you so much. It's so exciting. Anybody from the UK want to talk? And you don't have to if you don't want to, but unmute yourself if you do. I just have to say 10, you have 10 in Israel? That's amazing.
We have 10 houses, yeah. And the house of Yael will be the 11, we'll have 2 more. So I think in end of 21, 22, we'll have like 15 houses.
Oh.
The health ministry is very, very for this. And we've been meeting with the people from the health ministry in Israel. And the goal is to have 130 houses opened in the next few years.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are 4. We'll be the 4th one of that's called Soteria, but Avram is correct in that there are 10 with different organizations who are backing it. And we're getting the health, what's it called, the HMOs. We're trying to get them to pay for things, and most of them are coming around.
Thank you.
Do you have thoughts about how you got the Soteria to be prioritized over the emergency departments in Israel?
I didn't understand the question.
People go to the hospital first?
No. In Israel, they don't need to go to hospital first. They are coming, if they are private, they coming and make the intake in the Soteria. And if they are coming from the HMO, they only need to bring a doctor
referral.
Yeah.
You described using drugs as a last resort or something in manic episodes. Is that a forced drugging that you're describing, or what? Can you?
If it's forced, we force people. In the beginning, we didn't force, and then all the house was break or bad things happen in the house. And now we're not forcing them to take medication, but we're telling them that if they're not taking medication, they cannot be at the house.
Y'all, I have to go now. This is Grace from Rethinking. I have to go. Thank you all so very much. Rachel is able to continue on Rachel, do you want to just, I don't know when I leave if the recording will end, but at some point you might want to close the recording so everybody could talk together, because we try not to have people who aren't speakers or rethinking people on the video, because we haven't gotten, informed consent permission kind of a thing first to post videos. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Rachel, and thank you, everybody. And this has just been magnificent. And please make sure you send us your email address so that we can make sure to notify you about the rest of the Soteria series. And of course, if you're interested in helping out with the Soteria Pure Respite Summit, Summer Summit. Take good care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Grace, are we able to save the chat?
I can see if I can open the chat, since there have been no Zoom bombers.
Yes.
But I mean, can it be saved?
Oh, yes, it will be saved.
Okay.
I don't think I can change the chat midstream, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
There was
I'm leaving also, but again, it was an honor and a privilege to just listen
Yes,
to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for being here. Yes. Anyone who wants to stay is welcome to. No obligation, of course. Yes. And yeah, like Grace said, no pressure, but if anyone from the Soteria UK is still here and is interested in sharing, we would love to hear from you as well. I'm actually not sure if anyone from Soteria UK is still here. Okay, great, but yes, we're definitely looking forward to the presentations from former Soteria Alaska and Soteria Israel, which we will be posting more specific information about. So, great. And I did just want to let everyone know as well. I can put something in the chat. This is unfortunately rather this is a really sad thing, but unfortunately there was a peer support person in Eugene, Oregon who died suddenly under very sad circumstances. And our friends at Mind Freedom, which is an organization some of you might be familiar with, are doing an online vigil for her today at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So anyone is welcome to attend that, and I'll put the information in the chat. And definitely this speaks to the need for programs like Soteria. So I'll put the event information in our chat.
Jason, I am going to put you out there and let everyone know that you're working on a document right now about how to do peer support in a residential setting. And I don't know if I'm putting you too much on the spot, but I know I'm very excited about it. And I think it'll be a really great resource for folks to know about. It's published, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Yeah, I'm trying to capture some of the knowledge and wisdom that has been collected over the past 6 years, because I think what we're doing is pretty unique right now in America, at least. There's a lot of short-term peer respites that are like less than a week, but the fact that we have a 6-month more or less time frame to work with people really allows us to build relationships and explore experiences in a much deeper way. And so I just think we're just going to keep moving it forward, right?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. Is there anything, did anyone else want to share before we adjourn?
I want to shout out to you, Voice, directly just one more time, because we're
yes.
grateful you're here and wouldn't be doing this without you. And I'm really honored you were here today to listen to us. So just thank you for everything.
Yes, yes, and Voice gave a wonderful presentation in November, which is available on our YouTube channel.
My honor.
Yes, yes, thank you so much, everyone. Yes, and unfortunately, Lord Mosher was also mentioned. He unfortunately died in, I believe, 2004. But I'm sure he would be happy to know that that the legacy is continuing with Soteria Vermont.
Just wondering, Rachel, is it?
Yes, yes.
Do you have the dates for the summit?
We have not ironed out the dates yet, so but once we know that, we will definitely be posting that on our website and our Facebook page.
Oh, okay, so ballpark June, July, August, you're not sure?
Correct, exactly. But yes, we will definitely let you know when we have that more firmed up.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's more likely to be later in the summer, but yes. Yes, thank you all, and thank you for your interest. Yes, we're excited about that.
Thank you very much.
Yes, yes. Well, if there are no final remarks, I will. We can adjourn. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Really appreciate it. And, yes, and we will keep you posted about our future events.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.